Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be around the world, and welcome to another Hosting.com Agency Success live stream. My name is Nathan Ingram. I am the agency coach and trainer here at Hosting.com, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today about a very important topic, which is pricing and how to get the money part of our agencies all dialed in. So, just a couple of quick notes of housekeeping. If you're just joining us in Zoom, make sure you open up the chat and say hello. There is always a healthy and robust chat, many times mocking me personally, that is happening there alongside the live stream. So go ahead and join in there. Also, you will find waiting on you the link for today's slides. You can download those, this whole slide deck. You will also have access to some links that are in that slide deck for great resources I want to share along the way. Also, one note before we start, and that is that if you have questions along the way, please use the Zoom Q&A. Now, to do that, just mouse over the shared screen where you see my slides, and you will see a little toolbar appear. You should see a Zoom Q&A icon there. That'll pop open a little window or put it to the side of your screen. I would just recommend you keep that open throughout. And if you have a question as I'm presenting, just drop that in the Q&A. And we'll get to those at the end of today's live stream. Also, if you just keep that open and watch as other people are asking questions, you can click the thumbs up icon under a question, and that will upvote it. And we'll take the questions in the order of upvotes when we wrap up. All right, well, let's talk about pricing, shall we? And let me begin by asking you an uncomfortable question. When was the last time that you sent a proposal and immediately thought, I probably should have charged more? Anybody ever do that? Yeah, we've all been there. And the truth is, pricing your work is not just about picking a number. It's about knowing what your work is actually worth and having the confidence to charge it, and knowing how to structure and present and defend that number if a client happens to push back. So today we're going to cover all of those things and the mindset really that holds most of us back. I want to give you a real framework for building prices and some principles that are going to change how you approach every proposal. And then we're also going to talk about how to negotiate with clients without caving in. So by the end of all of this today, my hope is that you'll have some concrete tools that you can put to work right away in your next proposal. So let's get started. Before we talk actual numbers, we need to talk about you, or I guess us, really, because the truth is that the most pricing problems aren't really pricing problems. They're mindset problems. Here's a pricing proverb. Your success in the business of the web is directly proportional to your ability to talk about money with clients. Your success in being a web agency owner is directly proportional to your ability to talk about money with clients. The number in your proposal isn't usually the real issue. The real issue is what's going on in my head before I type that number in the proposal, and when I'm typing it, and the moment that I hit send. It's all what's happening right here. And that's where this conversation about pricing has to start. Now, if you weren't with us last month when I did the live stream about imposter syndrome and surviving a crisis of confidence, I want to invite you to watch this. It's on YouTube in our agency success playlist. The direct link for this presentation is right here in this slide. If you've downloaded the slide deck as a PDF, you can just click on that and go straight to this video. And this video is important because it's about the voices in my head. And I bet you've got some of those voices too. And those voices in my head, the imposter and the hero and the critic, they get really loud when money starts to enter the picture. When I start to try to put a monetary value on my work, because it's easy to tie the value of our work with the value of us as a human being when they're really completely different things. So if you didn't watch last month's live stream, that's sort of foundational content to this one. And I'd invite you to go back and rewatch it, because truly It all starts with you. It all starts right here. These voices going on inside of our head that create doubt and fear and guilt when we start to put a number down on a proposal to give to a client. Now, I want to unpack each of these pieces before we get into the actual numbers of pricing. Let's talk about doubt and see if you resonate with any of these internal thoughts. Have you ever thought to yourself, I'm not good enough to charge that much money for my work? Or everybody else is so much better at this than I am? Does that sound familiar at all? You don't have to say anything in the chat, but if it is, say it, because it's a very common, these are common sets of thoughts that we struggle with as we're particularly when we're putting a monetary value to what we know. Now, if we're going to deal with the reality of doubt, we have to ask ourselves some hard questions. What is the reality? What is my true value? Or really, when will I be good enough to charge this much? Like, at what point will I ever be good enough? Maybe I should just start charging this much, right? Dialing in pricing is so much more about your mentality than it is your proficiency. Now, take a minute to just let that soak for a minute. Your struggles with pricing and doubt about how much I should charge is much more often about our mentality about ourselves and our work than it is about our proficiency in the work that we're delivering. Now, what about fear? Resonate with any of these internal thoughts? What if I lose this job? Or what if they say no to my proposal? Or what if they hate me? Does this ever ask yourself those questions? That fear comes up, right? So if we're going to deal with fear, we have to change our mindset because the problem is rarely not know it. Let me say that again. The problem is rarely knowing what to charge. We know what we ought to charge. The problem is having the guts to charge that much. And we start arguing with ourselves in our head about what will happen if I ask this much work, this much money for the work. What will the client do? Will they, what will their response be? It's this fear that pops up. It's not necessarily not knowing what to charge. It's having the guts to charge that amount. And the really hard question that we have to ask ourselves is, how much money am I willing to lose in order to be liked by a stranger? Because that's really, if we boil it down to the nuts and bolts, that's really what it's about. How much money am I willing to lose because I'm afraid of how a stranger is going to respond to that ask? Now, how about guilt? You ever ask yourself any of these questions in your head or say these sorts of things? I don't deserve to charge that much. Or I just changed the theme a little, or I'm just going to add a few plugins. Can I really charge this much? And this is what we talked about last month in that imposter syndrome live stream, which I called the I just syndrome. Well, I just did this, or I just did a theme, or I just put a few plugins together. And the issue is the gap between what you know and what your clients know has real value. If I'm going to deal with the guilty voices in my head, I have to remember that the things that I know have value. We need to stop comparing ourselves to other professionals who do what we do. And instead, if you're going to make some comparisons, make the comparison between you and the client, because this is where the I just syndrome really comes in. You could say, I just launched a website. Okay, well, so you just launched a website. What would happen if you sent the client a zip file of their website, the files in the database, and said, here, job done? What would they do? Oh, all you have to do is migrate it to your cPanel, create a database, import it, and you watch their eyes get really big. Well, you just launched a website because this is things that we just do. It's part of our job, and we do it so frequently we forget that there's a lot to this. And there's a lot that we know that our clients don't know. And the distance between those two things has value. And we forget that because so much of our community as web professionals is with other web professionals. And there's always going to be people who know certain things more than we do. And we may know certain things more than they do. But it's because we're all professionals. when you compare yourself to the client, it gets to become a little bit different. So know, what you know has value. Don't be afraid to charge for it. And a lot of times it boils down to, how do I view my work? Do I have a hobby or do I have a business? I mean, why are you in business? What is the business that you've created? What's its purpose in your life? What are your goals? Does it need to be a full-time gig? Or are you needing to put food on the table? Is it just a little part-time side hustle for some extra work? What are you building? Because if it's just a hobby and you're just doing this for fun, then none of this pricing stuff really matters. But if this really is a business for you and not a hobby, then this stuff is critical. And it starts here. It starts with us. So there's a great quote I ran across some time ago from Mike Monteiro in his book, Design is a Job. He said, charge as much as you can, deliver honest value, and never work for free. Tons of wisdom in this book. And this is one I would definitely recommend that you take a look at. You can find it on Amazon. You can go to abookapart.com and find this and other really great resources. But this book, Mike Monteiro, Design is a Job, if you've never read this, this is one of those foundational books that I would recommend to anybody doing any sort of creative work like we do for clients. This book is all about mindset and helping you dial in the fact that what you do has absolute value. I see some folks saying they have this book already, and I'd recommend that you go back and take a look at it if it's been collecting dust on your shelf for a while. There are so many good thoughts in this, and it will help to build confidence in the way you think about yourself and your work. Okay, so we've started off with the top. It starts right here in our head. Now let's get into some practical things. How do we deal with pricing as web professionals? Some folks think there's this secret formula for pricing that's out there somewhere. And what I'll tell you is the most common mistake that web agency owners make when it comes to pricing is thinking that everybody else has it all figured out 100%. And I can tell you, after working with web professionals for over 10 years and as a coach, a business coach for micro agency owners, I can tell you that there are very few people who have this all the way dialed in. I don't have it 100% dialed in. I'm constantly learning and evolving and tweaking my pricing strategies. Matter of fact, a lot of times you can find people out there on the YouTubes and other places that just seem like they're the pricing guru and they never make mistakes and they've got it all dialed in. And what I'll tell you is, I think that's a persona. I don't think it's reality. And I think that most of us struggle with this issue. So if you find yourself struggling with pricing, you are absolutely not alone. This is a common challenge. I think if there is a secret to pricing, the only secret is experience. We're going to overcharge on some proposals. We're going to undercharge on some others. And hopefully we get better at it over time. Now, I'll tell you, when the time that I really started dialing in my pricing as an agency owner was probably about 15 years ago. And I want to tell you about the day that I learned I wasn't charging enough. I had a friend back in those days. He's moved away. We don't see each other a lot now, but back in those days, I saw him a lot. He was a video guy. Like, his main business was doing videos for small business, and he would build some custom websites on the side. Now, this was, around 2010, and WordPress and Joomla were still super competitive with one another. And he was building Joomla websites, and all he was doing was pulling Joomla templates off the shelf and just slapping them together with some text for the client. And that's what he was doing. Now, for me in that day, a typical custom WordPress site was around $3,500. That was, about average back in, 2010. When he and I had this conversation about he was building just templated Joomla websites, he was charging $7,000 a website in 2010, and his clients paid it. And I just stopped for a minute, because what we were building was far superior technically to what my friend was building. But that wasn't the issue. He wasn't selling websites. He was selling trust and experience that he had built up with the client. The clients trusted him. They knew that whatever the cost was going to be, cost wasn't their issue. What they were paying for was having a trusted professional to do something that was going to meet the need that they had in their business. They knew that it would be what they needed. And quite frankly, Ours was a technically superior product, but his product worked and he was able to sell it. And that made me scratch my head about my pricing. So, how do you charge for your work? How do you know what to charge? The first thing I do is say, ask. Are you rubbing shoulders with people in your world, in your geographical area, or with others that do what you do? Be rubbing shoulders with them and kind of asking them what they charge? You'll find that you can actually get a lot of information that way. It seems super simple, but really that's the place to start. Discover the price points in your market. And if a client chooses not to have you build their website, ask. Follow up with an email. What was it that helped to make your decision to go with the other provider? Just asking and getting information can be super helpful. Because what I think you'll find is that in most markets, there are three typical pricing tiers. You'll find that there are amateurs doing work just kind of as a side hustle. You'll find the solopreneur micro agency group of folks doing kind of what we do. And then you find the full service agencies. And these kind of fit into three different pricing buckets. You might find, amateur side hustle type people. They're willing to build a website for $2,000 or $3,000. The solo micro people, probably, a little higher, $4,000 to $10,000. Full service agencies, many of them, it's going to be $30,000 to just get through the door. Now, here's the thing. Each of these kinds of pricing tiers has an ideal client. And that's not just based on the price, but really what is the experience the client is looking for to work with, with you, right? So just this week, we had an RFP, a request for proposal, come to us for a project that was probably $100,000, maybe more. Huge website, big nonprofit organization, CRM integration, a bunch of things. And we took a hard look at it, and I realized, you know what? We're just not positioned to deliver what this client needs. They truly needed a full service agency to do all the things that they needed to do. And so we looked at that $100,000 and said, I'm sorry, but we're not the best fit. Thank you so much for thinking of us. And that was a little hard from a budgetary perspective, right? But it was absolutely the right decision. So we have to kind of know where we fit. And when you see where you fit, that also starts to build confidence. But what I'll tell you is this: charging too much for our work is usually not the problem. Our issue is that we charge too little. So let's just take advantage of the brain trust that is gathered here on this Zoom call. And I would like everyone, if you would please, I'd invite you to, in the webinar chat, just answer this question. What do you charge for a basic website? Or if you have a starting at price, what is that? Would you be willing to drop that in the chat? I think it would be helpful for all of us to see what that starting price is. All right, and everybody take a look. 5,000, 3,500, 5,000, 3,000 pounds, which is what, Ben, about 4,500 USD, something like that. Doug, 4K, starting at 25, minimum 5K. All right, yeah. So everybody's kind of in that range, right? So take a look. And if anybody else hasn't responded, please do so. It's a very unscientific data point here, but it can help us just kind of see where we fit among others. So it's an interesting point, right? So most folks are right in that $5,000-ish, a little more, a little less, depending on where you are. All right. So what I want to give you, and once you kind of see where you're currently fitting in these pricing buckets, let me help you think through what I'm going to call a practical formula for pricing. Now, I've put this out here because it looks a little intimidating, but I promise you it's not. Here's how this works. If you're going to put together pricing for a project, like a lot of times we just focus on this part right here. What is the scope of work and what am I going to charge for it? But I want to suggest that there are a number of other things we need to consider. Now, clearly, we're going to start in this whole process with the actual work, right? Like, what is it that we're building? Is it a brochure site? Is there e-commerce? Are there custom post types? Are there other custom functionality? Like, what is the actual work, right? So what do I have to do? How much time is it going to take? What is the effort involved, right? So that's the work. But then there's also this issue of the sum is greater than the parts. So there's a value multiplier here, right? Like, what is the final value of this project to the client? That is our scope of work. What we're going to do and the value that it's going to bring to the client. We articulate that in our proposal as part of the scope of work. So we figure that bit out, okay? And usually that's where we write the proposal. But I want to suggest there are at least three other pieces of a pricing formula that we need to consider. The next one along the line here is project management. How much time do you spend wrangling the client, right? Following up emails, doing meetings, doing revisions and these sorts of things, right? Answering questions, doing training. All this project management type work has value and needs to be charged. Matter of fact, and I see this, folks, I see this all the time in Facebook groups for WordPress professionals. And people are all mad at the client because the client's asking questions and blah, blah, blah. And what that tells me is this is a person that has not put project management as a line item in their proposal. And they're all frustrated because the client is costing them time and effort, and they're not able to charge for it because they base their price on the scope of work alone. I mean, you reap what you sow in these situations. So my suggestion is you add about 20% for project management, maybe more, maybe less, depending on how much hand-holding a client is going to need. Now, the next piece, folks, this is the secret sauce. This is what we'll call the unique scenario. And I got this from a friend of mine. I'll give you his book here in just a minute. The unique scenario. I don't see this discussed in a lot of pricing conversations, so don't miss this. What is it that makes this project unique? Okay, and let's start with this. That's a ubiquitous object, isn't it? We've all seen these. We've all bought these. So the question is, how much does a bottle of water cost? How much does it cost? And Paul has answered, or he's asked the right questions there in the chat. Where and when? And like Stacy and Sue, depends where you buy it. Jamie says it depends on the label. This is true. So think about this. You go to a dollar store and it's going to cost you $1. Or a gas station, it's $3. If you're at the airport, it's $5. If you're at a sporting event, it's $8, right? It's the same bottle of water. What has changed? The cost is determined by the unique scenario in which that bottle of water is sold, right? There's a unique scenario that has to be fit into our pricing model. Now, my friend Brian Rothstein wrote this book called The Psychology of Pricing, and look at that. It is a book. I'm talking about it is a book, and it's brilliant. You can get it on Amazon, and I would recommend that everybody that does pricing get this book. It will level up your pricing game because in this book, Brian outlines all of these different unique scenarios. These are things that can affect the price, and he gives recommendations on how these unique scenarios might factor into your pricing. So is it a rush job? Is it you're trying to level up from, it's a level up opportunity for you? Do you have a stellar reputation? That's a unique scenario. You can charge work for that. Is it stopgap work? Like, you're trying to come in and just get something, make some quick work happen. Is it a barter situation? Are they a difficult client? This is what we call the PETA factor, pain in the asterisk. Is this a hard client to work with? If so, we're going to charge more. Do you have niche experience in this area? Is it pro bono work? Is it package pricing with some other things? Is it done in partnership with another agency? Is it a friends and family type situation? One unique scenario could be you're desperate. I got to make money. And so that's a unique scenario, right? And maybe put a negative there in your pricing formula. Is it an RFP? Because look, if you're going to go through an RFP process, those things can be brutal and will take a lot of time investment with absolutely no guarantee that you'll ever see $1 out of that project. Is it a nonprofit organization? Maybe you're busy, and if you're going to take some more work, it's going to be worth a little more money. Is this a client with a substantial budget? Is this something where there's a strained business relationship going on? Could it be performance-based pricing where you make more if the site does more? Low budget, that should be, sorry, that should be far. It's an unfortunate line break. Sorry about that. Does the client have a low budget, or is there foreign currency exchange or maybe cryptocurrency involved? So there's all of these unique scenarios. Brian lays them out in his book, and I would recommend that you get it and read this. If you really want to dial in your pricing, it's a fantastic resource. So all of these unique scenarios can be factored in as part of our pricing model, right? Now, here's the last piece that most people forget, and that is to add a profit line. Say, wait a minute, all this work is my profit. No, all this work is paying for the work, okay? Every business has to make a profit. Think about this in terms of any other business. A business has a cost of goods sold, they add a profit markup, and that's what they charge, right? But we seem not to do that, and we need to do that because we have the cost of work, like what am I paying myself to actually do the work? But as a business, remember, you have a business, not a hobby. A business needs a profit line, right? So we have to add an additional 15 or 20% for taxes and overhead and all of those things, plugin licenses, all of that. Let that be a separate line item on your proposal. Now, I'm going to give you here a very, 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 very simplified example of how you might do this. Do you see the tentative nature of this gift here in this sheet? So this is very simple, and my point here is not that you should do exactly this. It's just to show you how this pricing model might work in a spreadsheet. Okay, so this Google Drive link will ask you to make a copy, so you do have to have a Google account. You know how this works, but you can make a copy of this Google Sheet. And here's how it works. So we're going to start out with just a base hourly rate. If it's $100 here, it's going to affect everything below that. We're going to say our hourly rate, our rack rate is $150. And so here's our scope items. We're going to do some content definition and creation. We're going to give it 6 hours. Setting up our core site and building it's about 4 hours. I'm going to write a custom post type and make some custom fields, couple hours. We're going to build out 5 custom pages. That's 12 hours. We're going to do a complex form. Take about an hour. We'll build in 3 hours of revisions and 3 hours for a pre-launch, post-launch troubleshooting flow. So when you do this, and these are just number of hours times the dollar per hour, that's going to give us a total of $46.50 as the scope of work. Simple, right? And again, that's where a lot of people stop, but you need this other column. So what is the value of that scope to the client? Now, it's really hard to see, but what I've done here is I've just put a 25% multiplier. You can do this however you want, but just answer the question, what is the value of the scope to the client? Then what am I going to do? I'm going to add right here, if you can see it, 20% for project management. Unique situation markup. It's a pain in the butt client. So we're going to tack on $1,500 right there with 15% profit, giving us a total of $82.44 and some change. Does this make sense? See how this can factor in together? And the big takeaway here is, look, the proposal and the price is more than the scope of work. There's more we need to be thinking about because, we're coming up. It's now March the 10th of 2026. In about a month in the US, taxes are due. And for many years, if you or anything like me, for many years, I always puckered a little bit when it got around April 15th because I knew I was going to have a huge tax bill due. Well, guess what? If I'm saving profit and I'm sweeping profit out of every project into another business account where it's just sitting there, hopefully not high interest savings or whatever, and it's just accruing some interest, I've got money to pay my taxes, most likely here, right? Or at least a huge chunk towards it. So it can really help with that. Or, hey, look, maybe it's time to buy a new MacBook. I've got a profit account I can spend from. And this just helps to make a more stable business. This is what big businesses do. We should do the same thing. All right. So does that make sense? experiment with this. This is a very, very, very simplified look at a sheet like this. But again, my point is to let you see how this can work, and then you take this concept and make it your own. All right. If you have questions, again, please use the Zoom Q&A for that and not the chat. And we'll get up to all those questions at the end. Okay. So if this makes sense to you, the next logical question is, okay, well, then how do I raise my prices to meet this? How do I start putting this into practice? And what I want to give you is a proven 3-step process to raise your prices for your projects. You ready? Here it is. Open your proposal, delete the old price, add the new price. Now, that may seem a little tongue-in-cheek, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic. What I'm telling you is we usually just overthink this too much. You can absolutely raise your price on a proposal you're working on right now. You just can. I mean, ask yourself this question. If I increased the cost of this proposal I'm about to send by 10%, would the client push back? Probably not. So why don't I? Or how about 20%? Would they push back? Probably not, because we're probably not charging enough to begin with. It truly is as simple as open the proposal, delete the old price, add the new price. Because I've met very, very few people who do what we do that are charging too much. I can't even think of one. In the thousands of conversations I've had with WordPress agency owners in 10 plus years of coaching, I can't think of one person who I talked to that was charging too much. Just doesn't happen. So look, what's stopping you from just doing that on your next proposal? Really, what's stopping you? You can absolutely do this and start charging what you're worth. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these 4 principles of pricing. All right, so here's four things to just kind of keep in your mind as you're evaluating your pricing structures. As you're talking about money with the client, be confident in your price. So a couple of great quotes here from Mike Monteiro out of that book, Design is a Job, that I showed you earlier. Nobody wants to give money to somebody who acts like they don't deserve it. Isn't that funny? I love that line. Nobody wants to give money to somebody that acts like they don't deserve it. So when we put our price down and we have these conversations with the client, we deserve it. Like, we're worth this much money. In this, I think it's the same paragraph in the book. He says, never act like you're sorry when it comes to your price. Yeah. So again, if you struggle with confidence in pricing, if you don't think that these words could come out of your mouth right now, buy the book, Design is a Job, read through it, and it will. I mean, who knows if guarantees are worth anything. I can't imagine that you would read that book and not come out with a boost in confidence to talk about money with your clients. Be confident in price. That's got to be something in our head as we're beginning these conversations with our clients. So the second thing I would say is avoid charging for your time. Avoid charging for your time. So hourly rates, if you're billing by an hourly rate, it does a few things. But first, it punishes you for getting better at your job. Because the faster you work, the more efficient you become, the better tools you invest in, the more efficient processes you create. And as you optimize those processes, the end result of that is your time to do the same thing decreases, which means you can't charge. You're not billing the client as much. You're penalizing yourself for getting better. Okay. Now you might say, well, I'll just raise my rates. And you can totally do that to a point. You will hit a ceiling, which when the client says, what's your hourly rate? And you go, my hourly rate is $280 an hour. And the client goes, you're kidding. My lawyer doesn't charge that. They do. But, who charges that much? How can you charge? Blah, blah, blah. There's a psychology of $1 per hour cost versus project cost. Now get this, okay? Let's say you're going to do something for a client and it's going to take 2 hours as your estimate, right? And you say, Mrs. Client, this is going to take 2 hours. My hourly rate is $150 per hour. And they'll think, $150 an hour. That's crazy. I don't make that much. How can you charge that? Blah, blah, blah. Or you could say, Mrs. Client, we need to do this thing. This thing you want to do on your website, it's going to cost you $300. And they say, okay, that's how it works. There's this psychology about dollar per hour versus just a flat project, flat rate project cost. Yeah. So stop charging for time. Please stop charging for time and charge for the value of the sum total of your work to the client. Maybe that thing that would take you 2 hours is really worth $400 to the client, and that becomes your price. Charge for the value of your work to the client. Plus, does anybody on this call enjoy tracking their time? Anybody? It's the worst. Tracking time is the worst. It is the worst. So why build a business you hate? If you build your entire pricing model around tracking time, you're creating a business you hate. And you've put a friction point between you and collecting your money, because if you don't like tracking time, you're probably not going to do it well, and it's going to be inaccurate, and you're either not going to charge enough money, or it's a pain in the butt to try to unpack that and do invoicing. It's just horrible. Don't build a business you hate. Make many projects that have a scope of work and a price, period. Your world gets so much simpler. I cannot tell you, folks, how many conversations I've had in coaching situations where people have brought an incredibly complicated billing process, and they're months behind because of course they are. It's onerous because they got to do all this time tracking and whatever. And there are thousands of dollars out there, tens of thousands of dollars usually, that have not been billed for because the process to do it is such a pain. Don't charge for time. It's going to be better for the client that you don't. It's better for you that you don't. Just start thinking in terms of many projects, M-I-N-I, many projects with a scope of work and a price. Okay, I'm getting on a soapbox here, and we'll move right along. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, number 3, get to price early. The most common mistake in a sales conversation with folks that do what we do is tiptoeing around the price. Most of us, quite frankly, are detail people. We're not the slick salespeople that have no problem getting into money and price and whatever. We're technical people, and so this price conversation is not natural to us. It is a skill that can be developed, but the default mode is often tiptoeing around price in the conversations that we have with clients. So talk about money quickly and do it more. The better you do, the more you do, the better you get at it. Don't have any surprises. If you get to money quickly, they'll have no surprises at the end of the conversation. You won't waste your time. They won't waste your time. It just sets the right tone from the start. Having a minimum price to work with us at blank is super helpful. We put that at the beginning of the discovery form for our clients, which is the way into our agency is through that discovery form. There's a minimum price that's listed there right up front. Engagements with us start at X number of dollars per hour. And that's, it increases based on the complexity of the website. So, all right, get the price early in that conversation. Even if that's difficult, the more you do it, the better you get at it. The 4th principle for pricing is, this is really so important. Raise prices regularly. Every single proposal you write, inch up that pricing a little bit, just a little bit, just to get used to this whole thing. If you charged, round numbers, if you charged $4,000 for your last website, basic brochure website that you built, the next one you build, charge $4,200, $4,400. It's unlikely they're going to reject it based on that price. Inch it up. Every proposal, just inch up your pricing. It starts to help you build the muscle of talking about money and raising your prices. And what I promise you is this: anytime you raise your prices, it's going to bother you a lot more than it bothers your clients. It's here. It's pressing in on those voices in our head. Price increases bother us much more than they bother our clients. And this also, by the way, goes for care plan pricing, annual or every 2 year at the minimum, every 1 or 2 years, incremental increases on care plan pricing. So I ask you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to in the chat, but When is the last time you raised your care plan and project prices? If it's been a while, it's time. It's time to raise the prices. We just also had a recent office hours question about friction that this person was experiencing to raise their care plan prices, and it was a systemic issue. They were using a payment method, PayPal, that required the clients to re-up, to resubscribe. Don't use PayPal for your care plan pricing. This is just an example of don't build a business you hate. Don't build systems into your business that are going to be hard to do to it, like that are going to get in the way of you accomplishing your goals. Whatever payment system you use, make sure it's such that you can raise your prices after a simple notification to your clients. Now, just a quick note right here. If you're not raising your prices regularly, you are cutting your pay, period. This is the chart of the annual rate of inflation in the United States between 2016 and 2026. In the last, well, since 2020, 25% inflation. So if you haven't raised your prices by at least 25% since 2020, you've cut your pay. Like even just to stay equal with the cost of living and the rate of inflation, you've cut your pay. And in other parts of the world, depending on where you are, that inflation rate is much higher. So take a look. If you need incentive to raise your prices, what you may find is that you're actually making less than you were 5 years ago, even if you've raised your prices a little bit. You have to pay attention to this. All right. We're going to wrap up with a subject that oftentimes makes us as web developers cringe just a little bit, and that is negotiation. Is anybody a natural negotiator here? I mean, maybe we can all learn from you. But what I found is that most folks are not, who do what we do. We're not natural negotiators. But the good thing is this is a skill that can be exercised and learned and improved, and we get better at it. Okay, so just a few notes on negotiating. First of all, negotiation is good news. I see this in Facebook groups for WordPress people all the time. People they vent, right? And blah, 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 this client, blah, 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 client, blah, blah, blah. They push back on my price and they're just a piece of, whatever. And I'm not going to work with them because they push back on my price. What a huge mistake. What a huge mistake. If a client pushes back on price, that's a buying signal. That means they're interested, because if they weren't interested, they'd disappear and ghost you and you'd never hear from them again. So if they want to negotiate, this is a good thing. Matter of fact, if they just accept your price without blinking, it means you probably didn't charge enough. You probably left some money on the table there. So look, don't get mad at clients if they want to negotiate. Now, if they're tearing you down, that's a different thing. But if they want to negotiate and ask questions on price and see how they can wiggle, that means they're a good business person. And that's fine. Let's talk. So there are 3 things that you need to believe and have straight in your head before you walk into one of these conversations with a client. The first is your skill. You do have skill. So go back and watch that presentation from last month talking about living through a crisis of confidence and imposter syndrome. You do have skill. You do have value, and your price is representative of the work that you do, right? My skill, my value, my price. I know those things. They're in my head. I come into it with some confidence. Now, the voices in your head may be saying things like, well, maybe I should just bring down the price a little bit. Those are your biggest enemy. Your client isn't the enemy. It's the voices in your own head that are the enemy. So we step into a negotiation with confidence because, yeah, our skill, our value, our price, those are meaningful things. Another little note here is state your price and stop talking. Now, you may have heard this little axiom of negotiation down there at the bottom of the slide. The first person to speak loses. I don't want to turn this into a big game, but there's really a lot of truth here, because what will often happen is we'll throw a price out there and the client is quiet. And so we're uncomfortable with the white space and the dead audio on the call or in person. And it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with a little dead air in a pricing conversation. This is what it costs. Silence, crickets. And our brain is going, maybe we should throw in a discount. We could probably work something different out, or it's just a starting point or whatever. Just state your price and let the silence sit. It's okay. And then let's talk about, if that wasn't really in our budget. If that happens, then we lower the scope, not the price. The price is the price. If their budget won't fit what we've proposed, we lower the scope so that it will. So that's a little outside of our budget, the client says. Okay, I totally understand that. You need to stay within budget. So here's some of the things we might need to remove in order to hit the budget point, right? The price is the price. What changes is what they get for it. Now, this, I promise you, this concept works brilliantly when you're talking to your clients. And the reason it works is that nobody loses. The client feels like they won the negotiation because they get the website in their price range, but you've protected your rate because you dropped the scope of work a little bit. And the beautiful thing about all of this is, if you pull something out of the original scope and say, you know what, we're going to build this in such a way that 6 months from now or a year from now, when there's more cash flow or the budget opens up for it, we'll build the original site in such a way that adding this, we won't have to redo anything. It'll just plug right in and fit right alongside what we've done for you. When you approach a site like that by reducing scope and pushing things off to a phase two, clients who negotiate scope instead of price, they're going to tend to add that scope later at the full price. So you end up getting all the money you want out of it anyway. It just might take 6 months or whatever. But everybody feels like they won. You're looking out for them there. They understand that your price is your price. It's a wonderful way to think about these sorts of conversations. Now, one other thing, it's sort of the opposite of this or the other side of the coin, is to have a few giveaways ready. So identify 2 or 3 things that you could add to sweeten the close. And by that, I mean, what it might just push somebody over the edge. A client likes to win in these negotiations. So what can I maybe add without cutting the price? And so these are things that have high perceived value to the client, but low actual cost to you. Okay. And examples would be, hey, we'll do a social media graphics package for you. Maybe you've got a suite of tools that can just crank this out. It takes like 30 minutes and you're done, right? Low actual cost for you, high perceived value to the client. And having some of these giveaways in mind might be enough to push the client over the edge. Throw in a couple of months of website care plan. Like, what does that actually cost you? Nothing. Really. I mean, you don't have a lot of hard sunk cost into providing that service. So yeah, throw in a couple, 2 or 3 months of that. Or maybe it's a 90-day review call where you'll give them, several different changes after the fact, or some consulting time to look at their site 90 days in. Or maybe you throw in a Looker Studio dashboard, whatever, something that's low cost for you, but high perceived value to the client. And what that does is you get the whole scope at the price, but the client feels like they got a little bit extra, and it's enough to make them feel like they won the negotiation. Now, those are the chips you can play. Just don't throw them all on the table unless the client pushes back a little. You may find that these giveaways kind of nudge the client over the finish line. All right. Next one here is don't compete on price. The client says, oh, I can get that done for $1,000 on Fiverr. And I'm like, yep. You can probably find it for $200 if you look hard enough, Mr. Client. We don't compete on price. We compete on quality, value, and fit. Because what you will find you go to one of these clearing houses for work, or hey, we could just do that ourselves with AI. Okay. See, what's that going to be like? How much hassle and frustration is it going to be? And does the end product actually meet, the goals that you have for the website? Look, you'll always find someone who can do it cheaper. Somebody's always going to do it cheaper. Don't be the person that's racing to the bottom, because good clients are not looking for the lowest price. They're not. Good clients want somebody they can trust who's going to get it right. If you let a Mr. Cheapo in the door or a Mrs. Cheapo in the door, and they're just trying to find the lowest cost provider, that client is going to be a rock in your shoe for the next 5 years. And you're going to wish that you had never done business with them to begin with, because they're going to nickel and dime you for every single thing for the entire relationship. It's not worth it. All right. One more quick mention before we start to wrap up. And that is this. When you go into negotiation, don't forget that your process has value too. Because good clients are not just buying a finished website, they're buying a guided experience through the whole process of web development. So as you've done all the work, all the live streams we've done and things we've talked about building good processes and communicating well with clients and all these things, that has value. Your process, a proven process, has value. The whole discovery experience and strategy in your communication through the project, no surprises. That brings value to the client, and that is something to emphasize in this negotiation conversations. Your process makes you different, and they need to know it. And that helps them see the value in that number that you're charging. That makes sense? All right, we'll wrap up where we started, and it's that pricing proverb. Your success in this business of web design is directly proportional to your ability to talk about money. Now, we've gone a long way today. It really comes down to this. Pricing, as I've mentioned, it's a skill. And like every skill, you get better at it the more you do it. So every time you send a proposal, every time you talk to a client about money, every one of those things is a data point as you're learning how to build your pricing rhythms. Every one of those things is a data point. And over time, you'll develop an instinct for pricing that there's not a spreadsheet that can replicate that. So the most important thing you can do today is this. Take one thing, find one thing in this session and put it to work in the next proposal conversation you have with a client. Maybe you raise your price a little bit. Maybe you hold your ground a little bit longer, or maybe you stop apologizing for what you charge. Just remember, you've built something of value and you deserve to be paid for it. So let's turn our attention to a few questions that have stacked up here. If someone wouldn't mind, please dropping in the slide link there in the chat once again, if you missed that. I recommend you download those slide links so you have access to the resources I shared. All right, if everyone, let's see, several questions stacked up. Let me invite everybody to open up the Zoom Q&A and upvote the questions that you would like to see answered, and we will answer them in that order, starting with Awesome Paul. Hey, Paul. Where do costs come in? Is that under work, hosting costs, agency license costs, etc.? Yeah, so that's the way I look at that. That's a business investment. This is project pricing, right? So probably there's two different kinds of licenses. There are licenses that are particular to a certain project. Like they're not licenses that I have an annual subscription or a lifetime deal to. The ones that I have an annual subscription lifetime deal, those are they're just part of the cost of doing business, right? That's just sunk cost, and all of our clients benefit from that. So they're not going to show up on the proposal. If, for example, it's a WooCommerce site and then we need this plugin and it's $89 a year, that's going to be on the proposal as a separate cost. So just by policy, we don't purchase those licenses for clients. We ask the client to do that so they own it. And then, that's just stated in there. So is that what you're after in that question, Paul? So I don't factor the price of those things into that formula. Now, that's just me. You absolutely could. Like if you as an agency want to buy that license and just bill the client annually for it or roll that into the cost of the care plan, that's great. And that can just be actually, it could be a unique situation. Put it into that category as you're factoring in the spreadsheet. Paul clarifies, you are not adding any agency cost to a project. This is just your cost and becomes the value of added to the client. Correct. Yes, those are sunk costs for the agency itself. Now, again, that's just me. There's a lot of other ways to do that. Find what fits right for you. But we actually, the way we approach licensing is that all of the licenses in our stack, page builders and forms and those theme and that sort of thing, those licenses are included. They're in our stack. And so we pay for those. In order to have access to those licenses, the client needs to have a care plan. So when we launch it, the cost of the care plan is what's paying for those licenses. So, coming as we look at how does this break down in the agency side, the care plan annual revenue offsets the cost of those licenses. Next up is Stacy. Stacy says, for your $8,200 project, is all content already created and images provided? Do you wireframe? Okay, so now okay, super details, so all the things, right? So, Stacy, that was a very, 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 very simplified example, just to show you how that structure could work. So, depending on all the things you do, those are the items in the scope of work, right? So if you're going to bill separately, and I think there was a content line item in there for content architecture, maybe some content creation, wireframes, like you could line item those out and they just be an hour. Like that can go in that spreadsheet. And that's why I was saying just take that and use that as a jumping off point so that it matches your way of figuring out how much or what all goes into the project that you should charge for. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. Next up is Karen. Hey, Karen. Um, oh, okay. Yes, the $8,200 project was an example, but I would love to see an updated example with SEO, accessibility, analytics. Awesome. Take that spreadsheet, make a copy, and drop it in. Like that's what it's for. I was not my point in that was just again to give an idea of how this formula fleshes out to a spreadsheet. So you can take that. And you're just adding to the scope. And you have a dollar figure there that then rolls over to the left column where you add value and all the other things over there. Does that make sense? So you can make that, that was just there as a beginnings of a framework. Got it. Okay. So yeah, the specific way of how I do it is a little beyond the scope of this conversation, but I think you have an idea of how all that could add in. Next up is Ben. Hey, Ben. When you start a discovery call and talk about pricing, what do you say and suggest when the client doesn't have a budget in mind? Great question. So and I've done a live stream on this. It's called the scope strategy, and it's in our replays. So in that live stream, I offer a whole framework for this discovery conversation. And by discovery, I'm talking, some people have different languages of what discovery means. For me, I'm talking about that first conversation with a client where we're feeling out what they need, what they're trying to accomplish. And at the end of that conversation, I'm either going to give them a range of prices I think it could fall in, usually about $1,000 if it's a simple project, or I'm going to come back to them with that number later or suggest a paid discovery process. So it depends. I try at the end, like if the client has no idea of budget whatsoever, then I'll try to give them a range, even if it's a big range. Like, what you're describing is somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. Oh, I don't have, okay, well then let's talk about scaling that back. Maybe you don't need to build your own personal Amazon.com. Maybe what you need is a page with your book on it, that sort of thing. So that helps. And a lot of the goal in those conversations is to ask a bunch of questions in a discovery form that they fill out prior to that conversation. And then look for red flags around pricing. Like we're going to ask in the discovery form, what's your budget? If they have no idea, that's going to be one of the first things we talk about in that call. I'll notice you don't have an idea of pricing. Let me kind of give you some, buckets of pricing based on functionality that we usually see, that sort of thing. All right. Next question is from an anonymous attendee who asks, what do you suggest on increasing care plans if you haven't got enough clients with a fear that losing a few clients from an increase would kill my business? I see this all the time. And what I can tell you is, can I give you 100% assurance? No. But what I can tell you is I've never seen people lose a bunch of clients from a price increase. One of two things happens. Either they hear nothing, and I'll just in our case, we just raised prices starting in February of this year. Like the email went out in December. We raised prices on care plans February 1. I didn't hear anything from any clients, 100 of them, other than 2 people emailed back and said, thanks for what you do. That's it. And that's always been the response. We think a lot more about these price increases than our clients do. I promise you. Now, the other thing that might happen is you have a client that says, well, I just can't do that. And you say, well, I hate to hear that. But what you'll discover is the amount that you make from the price increase from the others oftentimes covers what you're losing if somebody says no. And chances are the clients who can't do that minimal price increase, and by the way, I'm talking like a 10% price increase, not huge, going up, for us from like 149 a month to 159 a month. Like if clients typically aren't going to push back from that. But if they do, what I'll guarantee you is those are the clients that are giving you the most trouble to begin with. And they are what I would call a blessed subtraction. Let them go. Let them go help make another web developer successful. Because those are generally not the clients that are the ones we want to work with anyway. And I realize I'm generalizing, but I've had many, many of these price increase conversations over the years, and it just doesn't, you'll be surprised how often clients don't push back. All right. Next is Stacy. I understand the spreadsheet for line items, but do you actually show all those line items to clients in the proposal? Absolutely not. Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking that, Stacy. I should have clarified that. No, that is an internal tool which you can use to put the final number on your proposal. Because here's what happens. Why in the world would I write a proposal with that much detail that's going to give the client ammunition to try to nickel and dime every single line item? No, 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 no. We give them the price for the scope of work and all the other factors built in. So the scope of work just itemizes all the things we're going to do for the single price at the bottom. Thanks for asking that, Stacy. TJ, another good question. Thank you for asking, TJ. I should have emphasized this better as well. TJ says, I'm a little bit confused on the hourly rate. You mentioned not to charge hourly, but then you mentioned having a minimum hourly rate to work with your agency. Okay, so a couple of things. First, the minimum cost to work with us is not an hourly rate. So, like, for example, at the beginning of our discovery form, it says the minimum engagement with Brilliant WebWorks is this much money, not an hourly rate, but a project cost. We don't do work like if we're not building or managing your website, we don't just do one-off web work. And if you do, then that just needs more conversation around how does that model work and so forth. There are ways even to do one-off web work with clients and still bill at a flat rate. That's a little beyond, that's a great office hours conversation. Feel free, if you want to dig into that, TJ, to dig into it. But that kind of work is really hard to sustain. So I tried to avoid that work to begin with. And the hourly rate on the spreadsheet was just as a base marker to do the multipliers. So TJ, does that clarify what you were after? Yeah, if you have specific questions about that, ask an office hours question, and that's exactly what office hours is for. I would love to dive into that. Okay, final question of the day is from Gene. Gene, regarding negotiation, do you mention anywhere at any time that there is an openness to negotiation if there's budgetary limitations? No. Thank you, Gene, for the question. Absolutely not. So the price is the price, and then you let the client decide what they want to do with that, right? So based on and the conversation flows like this. Based on our discussions of what you want to accomplish, this is what we feel the scope is going to get us from here to there, and this is what that scope of work costs. And if the client says, oh, we just don't have the budget for that. Well, first of all, did you tell them ballpark ahead of time what this was going to look like before you spent the time to write the proposal? That's part of that scope framework that we've done here a couple months ago. But also, we're not going to be able to do that. Okay, well, what can we, again, how can we reduce the scope to fit your budget? We'd love to work with you. But to hit that budget point, we need to remove these things from the scope of work. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour and a few minutes. We went a bit over here, but those were excellent questions. Really, really appreciate you all being here today, and I hope this was helpful. Again, we're back for office hours on Thursday. We'd love to dive into more specific questions about pricing or anything else you want to talk about. If you don't have that link, the link to register for office hours is there in the chat. You will find it at the top of our upcoming live streams link tree right there. So make sure you're registered for office hours. I'll see you back then here on hosting.com's Agency Success, where we go further together.